مرحبا بكم في حوارات السياق. حسمت قوات الأمن الصومالية معركة استمرت أكثر من 20 ساعة مستعدة السيطرة على فندق قريب من القصر الرئاسي في العاصمة مقديشو تحصن فيه مسلحون من حركة الشباب الموالية للقاعدة، ولقي ما لا يقل عن 15 شخصا مصرعهم أثناء الحصار الذي فرضه المسلحون على الفندق قبل سيطرة الشرطة على الوضع. عموما للمزيد من المتابعة ينضم إلينا البروفيسور ستيج هانسن، أستاذ مشارك في برنامج العلاقات الدولية في الجامعة النرويجية لعلوم الحياة ومؤلف كتاب الشباب في الصومال. أستاذ ستيج، مرحبا بك معنا.
Thank you for having me.
ماذا أخبرنا هجوم الفندق هذا الأسبوع في مقديشو؟
I think it's Al-Shabaab who is kind of communicating that they can get back to the government after the government has started this large-scale offensive in several provinces in Somalia. So Al-Shabaab is again hitting where it hurts for the government, and they are demonstrating that they can reach relatively safe zones inside Mogadishu. But it's also a sign that Al-Shabaab is taking the government offensive serious because we've seen that we have an increased frequency in attacks on hotels and terror attacks inside Somalia after August and the current offensive that the government has launched inside Somalia.
أفهم من حديثك أن الميليشيا عادت للعاصمة في شكل حرب عصابات؟
I think Al-Shabaab has been there for quite a while. You know, they've been able to infiltrate the city. It's not like they hold territories in the city, but they've been able to infiltrate. We have seen the Shabab launching several terrorist attacks quite close to the middle of the city. But perhaps equally important, we also seen widespread Shabab taxing inside Mogadishu. So there's a lot of businesses that pay money to Shabab inside Mogadishu. And that shows that the private sector is taking the threat from the Shabab inside Mogadishu very real. So they had some kind of presence. They haven't controlled the city militarily since 2011, but they had some kind of presence, and they were able to implement terror attacks in the center of the city for quite a while. But what we see now, it's intensified in the autumn of 2022.
كيف أعادت حركة الشباب تنظيم صفوفها لتكون بهذه القوة على الأرض؟
I think they use the power that they have. There's a widespread corruption in the government services. So there's probably easy to infiltrate parts of the Somali police and parts of the army. We have stories of army officers that have also paid taxes to the Shabab in the past. So there's something still some big challenges with the law enforcement agencies in Somalia and also with the parts of the Somali army when it comes to payment and when it comes to corruption and when it comes to proper behavior, for example, at checkpoints. So I wasn't surprised by this attack, and I wasn't surprised that they were able to infiltrate. I think when you have low payment for your police, when the police have a lot of issues when it comes to service delivery, then it becomes easier to infiltrate. And that's what Shebab has taken advantage of. And unfortunately, I think that's also an opportunity that they will have in the future because those parts of the security apparatus haven't really been fixed. That's perhaps the big weakness in the current government offensive as well. We don't know what they will put in place in newly liberated areas. And if it's left open after they liberate it, I'm sure that the Shebab will come back in the future.
الرئيس حسن شيخ محمود يخوض حربا شاملة على حد تعبيره على ميليشيات حركة الشباب. هل اتضحت ملامح استراتيجيته لتحقيق ذلك؟
It seems to have been a clear strategy. What the president is doing is taking advantage of local militias. So we gather local militias, very often clan-based, although that is not directly spoken, in order to help the government and to basically enhance the government forces. It's focused for now on specific provinces, and there is a real military advance. They are taking new cities. But as I say, the issue in the past have very often been when you have these military offensives that you don't manage to secure the cities that you're actually taking after you take them, and then the Shebab will come back. So the question is if the president now ensures that there's some kind of security in the newly liberated areas and don't repeat the mistakes that his predecessors in Somalia has done in the past, and also the international intervening powers have been part of this lack of attention to security in newly liberated areas in the past. So there is a momentum. It's a clear momentum. They are taking new ground, but the question is, are they able to secure them? And do they have the proper mechanisms to secure them? If they fail at securing them, this offensive will just be another failure as the other offensives against the Shebab have been in the past.
هل العودة إلى تاريخ الحركة وانفصالها عن اتحاد المحاكم الإسلامية وبداية ممارسة نشاطها العسكري في عام 2007 يساعد على فهم ما يحدث الآن؟
It can help us with understanding several things. You know, the Harakat al-Shabab is definitively a very clear terrorist organization, and there's no doubt about their connections to Al-Qaeda, although they are acting very independent. But what we can learn from it is that the Shabab also provided something else in Somalia. They provided some kind of governance, and their Sharia courts were rather popular until even today. They have been rather popular because they are to a large extent less influenced by corruption than the government courts, and in one sense faster as implementing. And so there is something that the Shebab also are able to deliver that the government haven't been able to deliver in the past. And that is perhaps something we could learn when you study the Shebab past, you know, that they had an emphasis on creating some kind of order in the areas that they conquered, and that for some Somalis this has been missing in parts of the government controlled areas. But as I said, it has a lot of other negative aspects, but we have to understand it in order for us to handle it. So it's an important aspect to bring into the discussion.
هذا ما يدفعني لسؤالك: ما مدى شعبية الميليشيا بين الصوماليين، خاصة لجهة عودتها بقوة مجددا؟ لابد من حاضنة هنا.
People don't in general like them, but they are appreciated for the order they bring in their areas, and their Sharia courts have also been appreciated by several Somalis. But there is a lot of skepticism to the Shebab as a whole.
كينيا تدخلت عسكريا في الصومال في أكتوبر 2011 لمواجهة تهديدات الحركة. هل يمكن أن تتدخل مجددا؟ وهل من دور للقوى الإفريقية في الوقت الحالي؟
There is a lot of help there now. United States is still back. They are back after they withdrew during the Trump administration. The Biden administration put special forces into the country again. They're supposed to be there in a supportive role, but they are engaging. And there's also a drone warfare, American initiated drone warfare going on in the country. So United States is there. And in addition to that, you still have the forces of the African Union. So you will have Kenyan forces, you will have Ethiopian forces, although weakened by the current civil war in Ethiopia. You will have Djiboutian forces, you will have Burundian forces, and you will have also Ugandan forces in the country. So there are several international interventions. There are also training missions that are there, and you have seen strong support from Turkey to the Somali army. So there are foreign intervening powers, but it seems like there are several aspects of this conflict that has been neglected by the powers that have intervened also, and one of them is the security of the average Somalis and what you actually build up after you liberate areas. So this plays a little bit into what's going on now. If there's no order, if there's no security in the newly liberated areas, then probably the Shebab will return. And that's a pattern that has happened in the past. Shebab has gone through boom and busts. They've gone to big military defeats, then you see the intervening powers that they have suffered those defeats at, neglecting local security, and then the Shebab will start taxing again, and then they will come back.
هل لك أن تشرح لي أكثر مسار تدخل هذه القوى والفارق الذي أحدثته على الأرض؟
You had interventions. You had the African Union forces intervening. You have before that you had a unilateral Ethiopian intervention, so the first intervention was by Ethiopia in December 2006. Then you have basically a small African Union component coming there from 2007, and then you had Ethiopia and Kenya re-intervening in 2011 and 2012, and then they became a part of the African Union forces. In addition to that, you have a strong U.S. engagement that has really been increasing since the 2000s, and United States is still there with trainers and with drones, and then you had not troops, but you had a strong Turkish economic and training engagement as well.
السيناريو الأقرب في الصومال إذا ما نحى الطرفان إلى السلام سيكون سيناريو تيغراي حيث الغلبة للحكومة، أم أفغانستان حيث سيطرت الميليشيا؟
Make no mistake about it, the Shebab have learned from Afghanistan. It's very clear in their mind what happened in Afghanistan, but they draw different experiences from Afghanistan. So say that this shows what can be achieved through dialogue, basically that they can take over the whole country through dialogue. And there is still a possibility that you can have Afghanistan-like chain of events if you are entering into the dialogue with the Shebab without having proper checks on the organization. But I do think that the most likely scenario for Somalia is things to continue that it is today. Small improvements, but kind of a civil war that is ongoing, and it can go on for quite a while. The only alternatives to this trajectory is either that you enter into negotiations with the Shebab, but then it has to be done in a proper way, or that you ensure local security and protection for the civilian population so that the Shebab cannot blackmail them into paying taxes. So that you only have these two options.
كيف استنزفت هذه المواجهة بين الدولة والميليشيا موارد البلاد، وكيف أثرت على حياة المواطن الصومالي العادي؟
That's a very important question, and it's counterintuitive, because what we've seen over the last 10 years is a big expansion of, for example, Mogadishu. So there's a lot of private sector development that is going on in Somalia, and you've seen Somali institutions also investing in countries abroad. And Mogadishu has been growing quite rapidly, and you had property prices also skyrocketing in Mogadishu. So there's a lot of economic effects, positive effects taking place there. And after all, Mogadishu is a much more peaceful place today than it was, for example, when I started to travel there in 2006. But that development is relative. The insecurity is still there. It's just that it's better than the low bar that was there before. And after all, Shebab do commit terror attacks. They do blackmail, but there's no open front line in the city anymore. So Somalia is suffering from the drought, but they also have a booming private sector. And there's also still a kind of urbanization and population increase in the larger cities that are taking place. And this is perhaps a little bit counterintuitive, but it's also because the Somali private sector has developed specific strategies to kind of survive in this very challenging environment. And also because of the large sums of money that the Somali diaspora actually sends back home to Somalia, that kind of influences the economy in a positive direction.
أستاذ ستيج، شكرا جزيلا لك للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
Thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure, and I'm happy to be in Arabic media again.
مشاهدينا، شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.